Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. The World Trade Center was located in Lower Manhattan. I worked in the Bronx. You have Captain Tommy Lonigan, who's actually in Queens and Manhattan, and Lieutenant Pat Clancy, who's in Brooklyn. We all responded down to the Trade Center. I want to thank you, first of all, for coming down to the Steven Siller 9/11 exhibit, Tunnels to Tower. It's so important that you come down today. And, I know you stopped and said a prayer for faceless firefighters on 9/11. There's 3 of us here to come by and tell you thank you so much for coming out. It really means a lot to us.
I think it's an asset to the Fitzgerald that they put on this show, that they provided the parking and the water and everything for, the people here.
Would you like to say anything?
Yes.
Would you like to say anything?
I think this is a wonderful idea. I wanted to go to New York, but I hadn't made it there yet. But this will be a chance to see part of it.
Well, I went in yesterday, and it's a pretty good exhibit. It really is. And the people they sent out, they're really good at what they do.
Well, good.
They really are.
Good.
Okay, we'll try to come back again and play in the casino.
Oh, okay.
since they did bring this out for us to look at it, I appreciate them for doing this. So, it ain't always about gambling, but this the business that they're in, so they looking out for us. Let's look out for them.
Right. We need to.
Okay, thank you. You're watching Word Up.
So what we'll do is we'll start here at this front wall, and what we'll do is we'll work our way toward that back wall and then over to that section. Let me introduce myself. My name is Tom Lonigan. I'm a retired captain from the New York City Fire Department. I was an active firefighter during 9/11 attacks. I happened to be actually very fortunate that day. My company was there. They got there right before the second tower collapsed. They basically run for their lives. I'm very, very fortunate. Every firefighter in my company, they survived that day. What we'll do is we'll start off with a little bit of little information about the trade towers and things like that to give you an idea of what the whole place was like. The idea was established in 1943 to establish a World Trade Center site. They tried to figure out what they wanted to do with that area of Lower Manhattan, so the whole west side of Manhattan. There was about 50 to 60 different types of designs that were planned over the years. They basically finally came up with an idea of what to do with this 16-acre site in Manhattan. They started breaking ground in 1966, and in 1987 they were completed with the project down there. We normally think of the World Trade Center as the Twin Towers, but actually there's 7 buildings down there. Okay? Again, like I mentioned before, what they did was they took this 16-acre site, right, where they put the 7 buildings, and in order to prevent the water from the Hudson River from coming in, what they did was they built a slurry wall, basically like a big bathtub in that area. And that went down 8 stories. The Twin Towers are 110 stories high, 8 stories low. Okay? In order to keep that water out, they had to build this slurry wall. Give you an idea of what kind of went on down there. 5 million square feet of office space in each tower. So you have about 10 million square feet of office space between those 2 towers. That was our financial district. If you worked in Wall Street, you came there, you took a train, the train came into the World Trade Center, you walked upstairs, you walked a couple blocks, you could be on the floor of the stock exchange. It was a very, very busy area. It was a tourist area, right? You could have up to 20,000 tourists in a day. Between the people coming and going, taking the trains, working in those buildings, you can have up to 250,000 people in one day coming and going. Another idea of just think of how much food. 20 tons of food daily delivered, right? Like I said before, when they built that slurry wall to go down 8 stories, what they have down there? They had the subway trains came in. They had a train that came over from Jersey. It's called a PATH train. That also came in. You had the trains from Brooklyn came in. You had your shops, your restaurants. It was basically almost like another city. Basically anything you wanted was down in that facility. If you look over here in this first showcase, this is actually a piece of that slurry wall that they built around the perimeter. It was 3 feet wide, about 8 stories high. We were actually very, very fortunate that day because this wall did not fail. It actually held intact. If this wall had failed, basically all of Lower Manhattan would have been flooded out. But that was a concern, and it actually held up. Very, very, very fortunate. It's a piece of, basically it's just donated. It's a piece of flooring from the Trade Center. Patty Clancy said there was tile on it. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's tile. It was flooring from the World Trade Center. We continue on. You look inside this case here. If you look inside this showcase here, you'll see some pieces of the Trade Center that were collected. Some glass from the windows, some marble from the lobby. Some metal that was basically just bolted, some bearings from elevated bearings. I have to tell you, I started going down there on September 12th. I was down there one out of every 3 days for the first month or so. I never saw any of this stuff. I could never tell that was a piece of glass. All it was like a ground dealt powder and metal. Just metal and powder. I couldn't say like this was a file cabinet or this was a desk drawer or a telephone or anything. It was just matter. It took 8 months to clean up that site. When those towers came down, 110 stories came down in 11 seconds. 13 stories high and 8 stories low. It took 4 months to get to ground level and another 4 months to get down to the 8 stories below. My feeling is that this stuff here was collected probably later on, once later.
Down here, 28 inch, there's a company that
Look over here on this banner. A lot of people have remember, but some people have forgotten that the first World Trade Center attack was in 1983. What they did was a terrorist box truck with explosives broken into the parking garage in the North Tower, right? Detonated it. The explosion ripped a hole 6 stories high in that parking garage. It killed 6 people, including a woman who was expecting a child. Injured over 1,000 people and about $600 million in damage. They were actually trying to topple that building. Up here, this TV screen is part of the whole development and development stages of the Trade Center, how it started, shows you. And it gives you some idea of just the number of people coming and going every day, taking the train. A lot of asbestos was put in those buildings, so when those buildings came down, you basically had glass. If you notice, there was what? 21,800 windows. So you had, look how big that is. You had glass. Everything was just pulverized. Just pulverized, vaporized. So you get an idea, look how many people coming and going on a rush hour day. Let me tell you, if that plane hit 15 minutes later, instead of 3,000 people dying, there might have been 10,000 people. It happened at 8:46 in the morning. And that's when everybody's still coming into work.
That's what I thought about doing.
You look over here, you continued up the Hudson River all the way up to North New York State Capitol. This is New Jersey up here, New Jersey. Like I said, there was a train that came from Jersey over to Hudson, and it came out at the base of the Trade Center. So what happened that day? The terrorists hijacked the plane. The first plane that was hijacked used the Hudson River as a guide. over by the Hudson, follow the Hudson River down, continue to follow the Hudson River down, and at 8:46 a.m. around the 93rd floor, the North Tower, first plane hit the North Tower on the 93rd floor. That plane hit that tower, it knocked out all the steel walls above. There were 3 stairways that were above, all 3 were knocked out. Basically, anybody that was above that 93rd floor, they perished that day. Second plane, same thing. When it was hijacked, we used the Hudson River as a guide. That Hudson came down the Hudson, continued on down. The difference is it went past the towers. Continue on past the towers, swung around over Jersey, down around the Statue of Liberty, did a big, it was a big airplane, did a big U-turn. 17 minutes later, if you look on this second board over here, the second plane hit around 70. Over here, there's an idea, gives you an idea of what the stairways were like. What happened is the people trying to get down the stairs and the emergency personnel trying to get up the stairs caused quite a log jam in the stairway. When you look on that middle board, you see basically what Lower Manhattan looked like when those towers came down that enveloped in that powder silica. If you look at the bottom of that little board, there's a small little square down there. We actually lost our fire department chaplain that day. He was killed. Like somebody jumping off the building. Michael Judge.
Gets up to the 45th floor and he says, "This is ladder 3, we're on our way up."
If you look in these 2 showcases, sort of a significant part of this this tour, this foundation. These companies are from Brooklyn. Right, ladder 101 from Red Hook, Brooklyn. This is a piece of an apparatus door from ladder 105 in Brooklyn. How did Brooklyn companies get into Lower Manhattan? There's a tunnel. It's called the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, and it connects Brooklyn across the East River, and it goes into Lower Manhattan. It brings you up about 2 blocks. Brings you up about 2 blocks from the World Trade Center. Right? So when the alarm came in that day, you can see it as a picture of the dispatch alarm that went off. The alarm went off that day. A lot of the Brooklyn companies got called. All they had to do was travel through the tunnel, came out, and they were right there, which actually led to the loss of life of a lot of firefighters from Brooklyn that day. This company here, 101, 7 firefighters died in that company that day. Everybody working on that fire truck. On 105, they lost everybody working in that company. This shirt up here. This shirt up here was worn by Lieutenant Dennis Oberg. And it was very, very unfortunate, very sad. It was a shirt that he was wearing while he was down there trying to recover his son that had passed away. We had a number of firefighter fathers whose sons were killed that day also. If you look at that little photo, that's a picture of the dads down there looking for their sons. After the morning of the 12th was the last day anybody was recovered alive. It was the Port Authority police officer. She was the last one that was recovered alive. By mid-morning on September 12th, nobody was ever found alive down there. To this day, there's still about 1,100 people that have never been found. About 2 months ago in the paper, through the DNA testing they're doing today, they actually discovered the remains of some young man from some company down there. And we are looking 17 years later. Like I said before, everything is basically just pulverized, vaporized, pulverized.
I remember I rode her that day. That was funny. And she ducked into a shop. I only heard this the day of it, and I never heard it again because she came out white, brushing off, and she said, the thing that startled me the first 10 seconds was to realize I was breathing remains.
Oh.
I never heard it again.
Yeah. Amazing. There are so many stories.
That's what's happening.
This here is a piece of fire truck, the bumper of a fire truck that was collapsed, that was in the rubble that day. It was from building number 7, which is about a 40, 50-story building that collapsed hours after the Trade Center came down. Building 7 came down. It crushed engine 28, but all the firefighters in 28 lived. Piece of steel that was down there. A piece of the ladder from level 5 from that fire truck. I was down there, I was standing on a pile. I was with another firefighter. We're looking down. And he says to me, look, there's a fire truck down there. And I'm standing here and I'm looking down. And he says, no, there's a fire truck. And I go, I can't see it. I could not make out this fire truck. He says, look, there's a fire truck. Finally, we was just starting to be able to say, oh yeah, look at that. We started to see part of the ladder. You know? I know, it's crazy.
Maybe you stop talking about it.
You come on over to this section. This showcase here has some equipment and some tools that we would use. I'll be honest with you, we use this tool here. It's called a Halligan tool. It was developed by a firefighter named, his last name was Halligan. It's widely used fire equipment throughout the country right now. It's got a fork end, it's got a pry end, a pick bar end. It's a tool a firefighter would carry if he's part of what they call a forcible entry team. That face mask, I've 25 years in the New York City Fire Department. I've never seen a face mask like that in my life. I always felt like it was maybe some other department came that day. Here's a harness that they put the Scott bottle on. Right, there's a harness. That to me is a nozzle from a standpipe. If you ever go into a building, you go in the hallway, they'll have the hose wrapped up, and they'll have a nozzle. That's a nozzle from a standpipe. Down here, that picture right there, that's a pretty significant picture. So this is a significant picture. What we wanted to do, anytime we found the remains of anybody that was down there, with sort of like, with some dignity, we wanted to remove the remains from the site. So what would happen is we found the remains of somebody down there, they would blow the siren. And all the construction would shut down, they'd shut down the truck, shut down the equipment. They would put the remains on a stretcher, put a flag on it, and carry the remains out of the site with some sort of dignity. If it was a firefighter, we discovered it, we knew which company the firefighter was from, we would call that firehouse, that fire company, tell their members to come down and take their member out. So we tried to treat everybody with utmost respect. That was what we considered sacred ground. Just like you had mentioned, there was people in that dust. We looked at that as like it was sacred ground. When I first got down there was no heavy equipment. It was such an enormous debris site, if you want to use that term. There was a time it's going to take time to bring equipment in, so when we were down there initially, we didn't know if there were still people alive or anything. I mean, that thing came down, there was huge voids all over the place. So what did we do? We started bucket brigades. We had bucket brigades up and down the whole site, from here to the casino. And for days and days, we just would fill buckets by hand, pass them along, try and open up any crevices or voids to see if we could find anybody that was down there. And that's basically like a symbol of what we did for days. This here is actually an outside piece of the Trade Center. Look here, you see part of the outside of the building after the collapse. This is the actual piece here. Yeah, look in this picture right here. Let me tell you, there were fires in buildings down there and around this site. Like, see that high-rise building right there? There were fires in buildings like there. that any other day would have been like a major fire in the city. I mean, you had flames ripping out of 40 stories up, right? This thing, this dwarfed it, or that was like so minuscule compared to what we were dealing with here, that they would say, the chief would say, all right, get your company, go up there and go to the 40th floor and put that out. Any other day of the year, there would have been 50 companies there, you know? But it was like, all right, you got to take a line up there, go put that fire out on the 38th floor, whatever. It was crazy times. A good buddy of mine, we came on the fire department together. We still have friends today. He actually was there. He survived both collapses that day. I told him when he told me the story, I said, write it down because you're going to forget it. Right? Write it down. He survived both of those times. So when Building 7 collapsed hours later, that was like a 40, 50 story high-rise building. Building 7 collapsed. He said, we turned around, we looked at this building coming down, and we were like, that's nothing. That's nothing. What we just saw. It was amazing stuff. This here, this is the excavator. This is basically the main piece of equipment that was used down here to clear out the site. Every piece of material that was taken from that site was put on trucks, was brought over to Staten Island, was put in a landfill where they had conveyor belts. They put all the material on the conveyor belts, and they would go through all the material trying to find any of the remains, anybody they could still find. Like I mentioned before, there's still 1,100 people today that have never been discovered. They had, I don't know if you want to call them welders, they had people with torches, construction workers with torches. And what they would do would be just going around, just cutting the metal, cutting the beams. And these guys here would constantly be picking them up. This is a pretty famous photo. We made it to a stamp around the world. One of the firemen here always says, I hope that every time a terrorist mails a letter, he has to lick this stamp. These guys went over to the west side of Manhattan, to the Hudson River, and there was a marina over there, boat marina. They took the mast of the sailboat, they cut the mast of the sailboat off, they carried it back, and that's what they used to raise the flash. This photo is actually, they are actually about 2 blocks away. 1 to 2 blocks away from the Trade Center. Just to give you an idea, this is basically what I saw when I was down there. Remember I said it was just metal and dust and matter. That's basically what you saw back there. Feel free to touch this if you want. This actual piece of steel from the World Trade Center was made into a little memorial for Captain Patrick, into a little memorial for Captain Patrick Brown. Patty Brown was a highly respected, he was a shining star. He was one of these guys that, he was a captain at the time, but he was basically just passing through. He was passing through that rank. He was one of these guys that he was just going to just rise up through the bar. Very great fire officer, very well respected firefighter. He happened to be working that day with his company, Ladder Company 3, in conjunction with Battalion 6, which was the chief and his aide, and 12 firefighters from between Ladder Company 3 and Battalion 6 died that day. I don't know if I mentioned before, but what happened was when I first played at 8:46, our shift changes at 9 a.m. in the morning. So the night shift was getting off at 9 a.m. and the day shift was coming on at 9 a.m. So it was what they call sort of like in between tours. So when the alarm came in, normally they lost 12 guys in ladder 3, between ladder 3 and 12. They should have only been 5 or 6 firefighters working. But because it was in between tours, 4 firefighters jumped on that fire truck and took in that ball. That's how we lost 7 and 12 firefighters from one company. Here's a memorial to Patty Brown right here. They came out with those ones with the canisters, the notice about the canister. They would tell us the air quality was fine. They would believe them. At night, when they set the lights up, you could just see the particulate in the air just suspended. And when they were excavating, when they were pulling, slabs of concrete, and they were pulling down and stuff like that, they were just constantly releasing. And for weeks and weeks, as they were opening up voids, it would light up. You'd have fires all over the site. Because when it came down, it compressed so hard that when you compress something, you squeeze it together, you create heat. And then when they opened it up, they introduced the air, the oxygen, and it would light up. So it was pretty amazing times. My phone, my alarm's going off. I don't know what that means. I have no idea, an alarm's going off. Oh, I missed the FaceTime. Like, grandson. So where are we today? 14 years later, right? It took 14 years to finally figure out what they were going to do with that site down there, that 16 acres. They basically had to take into account the wishes for the families. You were dealing with the Port Authority, you were dealing with New York City, New York State, federal government, trying to figure out what to do down there at that site. So I have to say, if you haven't been there, go down there. But I have to say they did a very nice job. I felt like they got it right. On the northwest corner of that 16-acre plot is what we have now is the Freedom Tower. Okay, Freedom Tower is 1,776 feet tall to commemorate our independence. Declaring our independence. It actually stands as the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere right now. It has 8 sides. It's unique, right? 8 sides, one side for each of the twin towers, each side of the building. In order to alleviate the overcrowding in the stairways for the people that are in the building are wider to allow them to get down. And they also now have dedicated stairways for emergency personnel if they have to operate to get into the building.